Before soul food became a cultural icon, before fried chicken chains and BBQ festivals, there was a kind of cooking born out of hardship and resilience. African American families in the South transformed scraps, leftovers, and the humblest ingredients into meals that carried not just flavor, but soul. These weren't just sandwiches. They were survival, memory, and community pressed between bread. Today, many of them are forgotten, but they once defined church gatherings, Saturday cookouts, and late-night blues clubs. Let's uncover 25 forgotten African American soul sandwiches, flavors of a people who turned struggle into celebration. 1. The fried chicken biscuit sandwich, a Sunday tradition. Every Sunday after church, kitchens across the South came alive with sizzling skillets of fried chicken. Crispy, golden pieces were sometimes tucked into buttery biscuits, making a sandwich that was crunchy, tender, and impossibly satisfying. The biscuit absorbed the juices of the chicken, while a drizzle of honey or hot sauce added soul. Families would share them after long sermons, children eating with greasy smiles while elders nodded with pride. Over time, as fast food chains copied the idea, the original homemade version, the one seasoned with love, patience, and secrets passed down, faded into obscurity. But for those who tasted it, the memory still lingers like gospel hymns on a summer morning. 2. The catfish po' boy, blues on a bun-down by the Mississippi River. Catfish wasn't just food, it was music, it was blues. Fillets dredged in cornmeal, fried crisp and laid on soft bread with lettuce and hot sauce created the catfish po' boy. It was cheap, filling, and powerful, perfect fuel for long days of work or long nights of music in smoky juke joints. Street vendors wrapped them in paper, serving them hot to workers coming off the docks. But as times changed and fast food replaced street fry shacks, the soulful po' boy lost its spotlight. Still, in the echoes of a blues guitar, you can almost taste the crunch of fried catfish on a soft bun. 3. The collard greens and cornbread sandwich, fields of resilience. Collard greens simmered with smoked meat were a cornerstone of soul food, and cornbread was its faithful companion. Sometimes the two came together in the simplest yet most meaningful way: a collard greens and cornbread sandwich. Thick slices of cornbread were split, stuffed with tender greens dripping in pot liquor and eaten by farmers in the fields. It was messy, it was hearty, and it carried the earth's flavor in every bite. This sandwich wasn't glamorous, but it symbolized survival and community, stretching humble ingredients into something powerful. Today, it's rarely seen, yet it remains a reminder of how food was more than fuel. It was dignity in hard times. 4. The chitlins and hot sauce sandwich. Bold and unapologetic chitlins, pig intestines, were once scraps thrown away by slave owners, but African American cooks turned them into something bold, cleaning, boiling, and frying them until tender and flavorful. Tucked into soft white bread with a heavy splash of hot sauce, the chitlin sandwich was not for the faint of heart. The smell was strong, the taste unforgettable, and it became a symbol of making the best out of the least. Families ate it at gatherings, laughing and sharing stories while passing bottles of hot sauce across the table. Today, chitlins are rare, and the sandwich even rarer, but it remains one of the most unapologetically soulful foods ever created. 5. The sweet potato and molasses sandwich, poverty's dessert. When money was tight and meat was scarce, sweet potatoes became a lifeline. Mashed, roasted, or sliced, they found their way into countless dishes. One of the most beloved yet forgotten creations was the sweet potato and molasses sandwich. Roasted slices of sweet potato were layered inside cornbread or biscuits, then drizzled with dark molasses. The result was a sandwich that was sweet, sticky, and deeply comforting. Children adored it. It tasted like dessert even though it was born of poverty. Families packed them in lunch pails, turning hard times into moments of sweetness. As processed candy and store-bought desserts took over, this humble treat vanished, but its story remains a reminder of resilience. 6. The ham hock and mustard sandwich, the worker's bite. Ham hocks, pork knuckles, were tough cuts of meat, but when simmered slowly, they became tender and flavorful. Sliced and piled onto bread with a smear of spicy mustard, the ham hock and mustard sandwich was cheap, salty, and satisfying. It was the kind of meal packed by field hands or factory workers, eaten quickly on short breaks before heading back to long hours of labor. The salty pork, the tang of mustard, and the chew of bread created a sandwich that spoke of grit and determination. Over time, as ham hocks disappeared from mainstream diets, this worker's classic was forgotten, but for a generation, it was fuel for survival. 7. The fried bologna and onion sandwich, the corner store. Classic. In countless southern neighborhoods, the corner store was more than a shop. It was a gathering place, and nothing was more iconic than grabbing a slice of thick bologna, frying it until the edges curled, and tucking it into soft bread with grilled onions. The fried bologna and onion sandwich was greasy, smoky, and comforting, the taste of childhood for many. Kids would run errands for their parents and reward themselves with this cheap bite, while adults paired it with cold soda after long shifts. Today, it survives only in memories and a few nostalgic diners, but once it was the king of corner store cuisine. 8. The pig ear sandwich, Memphis street legend. On the bustling streets of Memphis, you could once find a sandwich that was as daring as it was delicious, the pig ear sandwich. Ears were boiled, then fried until tender yet chewy, and tucked into bread with slaw and hot sauce. The texture was unique, crispy on the outside, soft inside, and the flavor was smoky and bold. Street vendors sold them late at night outside blues clubs where the music was loud, the drinks were strong, and the food had to match the energy. Over time, as tastes shifted and offcuts lost their appeal, the pig ear sandwich nearly vanished, surviving only in a handful of old-school spots that refused to let the tradition die. 9. The fried catfish and hot pepper sandwich, blues on fire. If the catfish po' boy was smooth jazz, then the fried catfish and hot pepper sandwich was pure blues fire. Cornmeal-crusted catfish fillets were fried crisp, then layered with fiery hot peppers inside bread. It was messy, spicy, and unforgettable, a sandwich that demanded attention. Blues musicians swore by it after late-night sets, its heat keeping them awake and alive. It wasn't fancy, but it carried soul in every bite. Today, it's nearly impossible to find, but in its heyday, it was the taste of southern nights filled with music, sweat, and rhythm. 10. The souse meat sandwich, cold cuts of survival. Souse was a kind of head cheese, pork scraps boiled, pressed into a jelly, and spiced with vinegar and pepper. It wasn't glamorous, but for many African-American families in the South, it was a way to stretch the animal and waste nothing. Served cold, sliced thick, and laid between two pieces of bread, the souse meat sandwich was tangy, chewy, and filling. It was cheap enough for the poorest households, yet flavorful enough to feel like a real meal. For workers heading into long days, it provided energy when nothing else was available. Today, it's nearly forgotten, but in its time, it was a lifeline in sandwich form. 11. The turkey neck and rice sandwich, festival fuel. Turkey necks might not sound like a delicacy, but in soul food cooking, they were prized for their flavor. Slow cooked until tender, then pulled apart and mixed with seasoned rice, they made for an unusual but beloved sandwich. The turkey neck and rice sandwich was often seen at local fairs or festivals where families would gather for music, games, and food. Packed into soft rolls, it was savory, hearty, and cheap to make in big batches. For communities that celebrated with food as much as with song, it was a centerpiece of togetherness. As times changed and turkey necks became harder to find in stores, this festival classic disappeared from the mainstream. 12. The BBQ rib sandwich, bone-in style. Before boneless barbecue sandwiches became fast food staples, there was the original, ribs served bone-in, straight between bread. The bone-in BBQ rib sandwich was messy, smoky, and unforgettable. Sticky sauce coated your hands, the bread soaked up the juices, and every bite was a fight between tenderness and bone. It wasn't practical, but that was the point. It was indulgence, celebration, and pure flavor. Families gathered at backyard cookouts, blues clubs served them after midnight, and neighbors bonded over the smell of hickory smoke. Over time, convenience won out, and boneless versions replaced the original. But the true bone-in rib sandwich remains one of the boldest statements of soul food history. 13. The fried gizzard sandwich. Crunch with every bite chicken gizzards were once considered scraps, but African-American cooks knew how to make them shine. Cleaned, seasoned, dredged in cornmeal, and fried until golden, they became crunchy little treasures. Piled onto bread with hot sauce or gravy, the fried gizzard sandwich was cheap, filling, and addictive. It was sold at corner stands, served at church picnics, and carried in brown paper bags to work sites. Every bite was a mix of crispy coating and chewy center, the kind of texture you either loved or hated. Over time, as people moved away from organ meats, this sandwich faded into memory. But for a time, it was pure soul in every crunch. 14. The pickled pig feet sandwich. Tangy and tough pickled pig feet might sound shocking today, but in the South, they were once a staple. Preserved in vinegar and spices, the feet were sliced and tucked into soft bread with mustard or slaw, creating the pickled pig feet sandwich. It was tangy, chewy, and full of character, a food that reflected resilience and resourcefulness. Sold in jars at small corner stores, pig feet were cheap and always available, making them a common treat for those who couldn't afford finer cuts. Eating them was a statement. This was food of the people, bold and unapologetic. Now it's a relic of another era, whispered about more than eaten. 15. The cornmeal fried oyster sandwich, coastal soul. Along the Gulf Coast, oysters were once plentiful and cheap, making them a natural part of soul food cooking. Dredged in cornmeal and fried crisp, they were served on bread with lettuce, pickles, and hot sauce, forming the cornmeal fried oyster sandwich. It was briny, crunchy, and satisfying, the taste of the sea mixed with the heart of southern kitchens. Families enjoyed them at seaside fish fries, and vendors sold them wrapped in newspaper near the docks. But as oyster prices rose and supplies dwindled, the sandwich became less common. Today, it survives in whispers of coastal cookouts, a forgotten gem of African-American foodways. 16. The pimento cheese and tomato sandwich, summer on bread. In the sweltering heat of southern summers, heavy meals were unbearable. That's when pimento cheese and tomato sandwiches became the go-to comfort food. Creamy, tangy pimento cheese was spread thick across slices of soft white bread, then topped with juicy garden tomatoes. The result was refreshing, yet rich, a sandwich that tasted like sunshine and community. Families served them at reunions, church gatherings, and front porch lunches. Children grew up with their hands stained orange from the cheese spread. But as processed cheese and supermarket tomatoes replaced homemade versions, the sandwich lost its soul. Today, it lingers as nostalgia, a memory of slow summer days under wide porches. 17. The fatback and collard sandwich, field fuel fatback, salted pork from the back of the pig, was once a cheap staple in African-American kitchens. When fried and paired with collard greens, it created the fatback and collard sandwich, a true worker's meal. Salty, smoky fatback crackled against the tender, savory greens, all tucked into cornbread or biscuits. It was greasy, messy, and deeply satisfying, the kind of food that gave farmers and laborers the strength to keep going. This was food born of necessity, but it became something people craved. As healthier diets and modern tastes pushed fatback aside, this powerhouse sandwich disappeared, remembered only by those who lived its heyday. 18. The fried liver sandwich, the taste of survival. Chicken and pork livers were cheap, available, and packed with nutrients, making them a vital ingredient for families with little money to spare. Dredged in flour, fried crisp, and layered with onions inside bread, the fried liver sandwich was bold, earthy, and not for everyone. But for those who grew up with it, the flavor was unforgettable, a mix of richness and grit that symbolized survival. These sandwiches showed up in lunch pails, late-night suppers, and small-town cafes. Over time, organ meats lost favor in mainstream diets, and the fried liver sandwich slipped away. Still, it stands as proof that even the humblest foods could be transformed into something soulful. 19. The sardine and mustard sandwich, a cheap lifeline. For families living paycheck to paycheck, canned sardines were a godsend, cheap, salty, and filling. Spread on white bread with a smear of sharp mustard, the sardine and mustard sandwich became a quick lunch for workers heading to the fields or factories. Its flavor was bold and briny, cutting through fatigue with every bite. Kids sometimes traded them at school, embarrassed by the smell but unable to deny the taste. It wasn't glamorous, but it was survival in its simplest form. As fresher meats became more available, this humble sandwich vanished, leaving behind only the memory of oil-stained paper wrappings and hard-working hands. 20. The molasses and butter biscuit sandwich. Sweet simplicity. Not every soul sandwich was savory, sometimes sweetness carried the day. Freshly baked biscuits split open and slathered with creamy butter and thick molasses created the molasses and butter biscuit sandwich. Sticky, rich, and comforting, it was often served to children as a treat or packed for long days in the fields. The molasses gave deep, smoky sweetness, while the butter softened the biscuit into melt-in-your-mouth comfort. It was poverty's candy, born of necessity but remembered with fondness. As refined sugars and store-bought snacks took over, this simple treasure disappeared from kitchens, but for many, it was the sweetest taste of childhood. 21. The smoked turkey wing sandwich, feast leftovers. During holidays and family gatherings, big turkeys were roasted to feed entire communities, but often the wings were set aside, too small for carving yet too flavorful to waste. Smoked, seasoned, and pulled apart, they became the star of the smoked turkey wing sandwich. Layered inside bread with gravy or collards, it was a rich, savory creation that turned leftovers into a celebration of its own. Families would pack them for the next day's lunch, stretching feasts into another meal. Over time, with commercial turkeys and different holiday traditions, this sandwich faded. Yet it still represents the ingenuity of turning lesser parts into soulful delights. 22. The hog maw sandwich, tough but true. Hog maw, pig stomach, wasn't a cut anyone else wanted, but African-American cooks transformed it into a dish full of flavor. Cleaned, stuffed with potatoes and onions, then roasted until tender, slices of hog maw were tucked into bread for a rich and peppery hog maw sandwich. It was chewy, savory, and deeply filling, the kind of food that could carry a worker through an exhausting day. Though far from glamorous, it symbolized the resourcefulness of a people who wasted nothing. Today, hog maw is almost unheard of outside of old cookbooks, but once, it was survival turned into tradition. 23. The fried green tomato sandwich. Summer's bite in the South, when tomatoes hadn't ripened yet, families refused to let them go to waste. Sliced, dredged in cornmeal, and fried crisp, green tomatoes became a seasonal favorite. Layered inside bread with a dab of mayo or hot sauce, The fried green tomato sandwich was tart, crunchy, and refreshing, summer in every bite. It was served on porches, at church socials, and during warm evenings when gardens overflowed. Though fried green tomatoes survive as a side dish, the sandwich form has mostly vanished, leaving only nostalgic whispers of summer kitchens. 24. The BBQ chicken neck sandwich. Fire on a budget. When money was tight, families still gathered around the barbecue pit. Cheap cuts like chicken necks were marinated, smoked, and pulled apart, then stuffed into bread with sauce. The BBQ chicken neck sandwich was smoky, messy, and bursting with flavor. It was proof that even the humblest parts of the bird could bring joy when touched by fire and smoke. Neighbors would line up at block parties, kids with sauce on their faces, elders nodding to blues drifting in the air. Over time, as supermarkets shifted tastes toward bigger cuts, this sandwich disappeared, but it remains a symbol of community around the fire. 25. The black-eyed pea patty sandwich, soul in every bite. Not every soul food sandwich needed meat. Black-eyed peas mashed with onions and spices were shaped into patties, fried golden, and layered inside bread with greens or pickles. The black-eyed pea patty sandwich was hearty, earthy, and packed with soul. It was a vegetarian treasure before the world even thought of veggie burgers, born from necessity but tasting like celebration. Families made them during New Year's for good luck, turning tradition into a portable feast. Today, this sandwich is nearly forgotten, but it's one of the clearest examples of how African American cooks created joy from the simplest of ingredients. From fried chicken biscuits after Sunday service to black-eyed pea patties on New Year's Day, these 25 forgotten African American soul sandwiches tell a story of faith, music, survival, and creativity. They remind us that food was never just food. It was community, resilience, and pride layered between bread. Though many of these sandwiches have vanished from kitchens, their legacy lives on in the soul food that continues to inspire. And maybe, just maybe, it's time to bring them back. Tell me, which of these soul sandwiches would you bring back to your table?